The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Happy Friday.
Martine Wishmare from General Bytes.
Howdy ho.
Ben Ark from LN Bits.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to Issue 1. Issue 1, Bitcoin price surges on Biden's crypto executive order. Cryptocurrency advocates celebrate the order while skeptics see it as a step back for regulation. Meanwhile, at the same time, Bitcoin drops below 40,000, almost wiping out the gains from Biden's crypto executive order. Yes, the political class is here and they're ready to regulate Bitcoin. They've started with a new crypto order from Joe Biden. Dan Eve, what do you think about the new crypto order and its amazing effect? First, driving the price up and then driving the price right back down.
No, again, like it just seems like it's they're trying to post attribute something to affect the Bitcoin price, right? Some people see regulation as a good thing because if you're either regulating it or you're banning it, and so if you're not banning it, then you're regulating it, which means you're not banning it, right? So that's kind of a positive thing. But there's so much turmoil happening in the world, and people don't know. I think the stocks are very jumpy at the moment. I just think that saying it's just due to say that the Biden regulation coming in, I'm not sure if it's just attributable to that. But ultimately, that there has been gold's obviously surging right now, which is the old standard. There's maybe the drop is that people are worried that Russia's going to be using it as their own standard. They've been obviously adopting a lot more gold recently, like them, both China and Russia have been taking on a lot more gold. So maybe some of the drop could actually be due to people worried about it being Russia suddenly starting to use it because they're being sanctioned everywhere. And they're like, oh, actually, this could be a risk because then, Bitcoin could get sanctioned, right? They could be reactive to that. So I don't know. It goes up, it goes down, it goes sideways, but ultimately, it's the hardest money, yeah.
There's also been a lot of action in the U.S. stock market, seeing the Dow go up 300 points, down 300 points, back up 500, down 500. There was at one point they thought there might be a peace treaty with Ukraine. The market celebrated that and then had the rug pulled on them the next morning. So it has been a very exciting time. Martine Wishmare, what do you think about the regulation and the market effect?
As Dan pointed out, there's been lots of turmoil in markets globally because of the Russian war and Russian-Ukraine war. Sorry. Some people call it conflict, but it's just a war. And I'm not sure if Biden's executive order made any impression on international markets because personally, I couldn't care less. On this side of the pond, we don't have Joe Biden. We have other things to worry about. And I think it's more that the market is shaky anyway. And crypto responds in a more shaky way than anything stock market. So regulation in itself, I think it's quite unavoidable, really. The moment Bitcoin value went up, this is where the regulators started paying interest. First they laughed at us with our toy money. And then all of a sudden it became a real thing. And now they want to regulate it and they want to prevent people from storing it in self-hosted wallets, whatever that means. Regulators will be regulators. And, the people that issue the centralized currency want to rule over the decentralized currency. But I think this war, crypto war as such, is not over yet. And we'll see. Time will tell.
The regulators are here. It's all over. Ben Ark, what do you think?
We fought the crypto war, the original crypto war against the US and the UK when it came to cryptographic code not being allowed to be used by free people. And it's similar with this. So the CBDC proposals from the Fed and from all these central banks, that it's just a way of them trying to, finally recognizing that the world does need digital currencies, digitally native currencies. But I mean, Bitcoin is so long in the making. I tweeted out today Hal Finney thinking about digital currencies 40 years ago. Like it takes a long time to get to where we've got to. And I think, if anything, with the Russian crisis, what it's taught people, for the Ukrainians and the Russians, is that you can't have centralized services. You need decentralized services. You need services which can't be taken out by the party political system which exists at that time. And I think more and more normal people are kind of understanding that this is very important. And this is one of the, I mean, dare I say, a good thing to come out of all this conflict is everyone realizes that, how delicate access to certain things are in our digital world, and how the best way to prevent against coercion and co-option by government is just to have it exist in a decentralized way. So the crypto, I mean, the government finally looking at cryptocurrencies in a rational way and doing an actual study of cryptocurrencies. Hopefully, they'll dive deep and understand that Bitcoin has all these use values and is very good for the development of all these industries and can bring in a lot of investment into their country. What I hope they don't do is see it as a threat to their CBDC and then try and clamp down on it. I mean, hopefully they'll say that, look, like a digitally native dollar could be a very useful thing for people if it's stable and people can use it. But by doing that, I hope that they don't then see that Bitcoin is a threat and then attack Bitcoin with regulation.
All competitors are threats. And it is interesting to see how all the kind of short-sighted or bad decisions made where the original internet always come back on the users. They didn't mask all of the location data. They didn't encrypt all the traffic. They're like, no one will ever scan all the data for locations and exclude locations. No one ever scan all of your traffic to see what it is and to really put it together. And, it goes to show that if you have a bad plan, you have to have a tight plan in the beginning. You have to encrypt everything from the beginning. And I know phone calls exciting, but we talk about regulation all the time here, almost every year. And once again, we have to go back and say the same things, that you can regulate Bitcoin on the ends of the network where the fiat goes in and out, but that's all you can regulate. So this is going to be very unsatisfying for the regulators. The idea that the regulators could say, hey, this is a Russian account, don't deliver any more Bitcoin here. Or conversely, this is a Ukraine account, don't deliver any more Bitcoin here. They're not going to be able to get that level of fine-grained regulatory control. This isn't like a new market like eGold, where they roll into the offices and they shut everything down and they're like, this is over. This is a new market like they roll into the offices and the guys say, hey, we don't run the servers. And it's actually true, right? It's not just like a front. They're like, yeah, we can't shut down all the servers. Like, sure, we shut down all of our nodes and we turned off all of our computers here, but the Bitcoin thing is still running, right? And this is going to keep being a problem for them. They're going to overstate it. They're going to say, this is the crackdown. This is the one where we're finally taking control of that money back. And then it just keeps failing because it comes back to this core idea we've talked about thousands of times about how you'd have to shut down the whole internet. Like the internet that everyone else uses for commerce, as long as that exists, we'll find a way to get the Bitcoin transactions out there across the network. We'll find a way to disguise them, as Andreas used to say, in cat pictures, joke images. There'll be Bitcoin wallets hidden inside. Like this will be a never-ending cat and mouse game that they will lose the way that they lost torrents and they lost Napster and MP3 and so many other things. But it's fun to see them grasp at it and get really excited. And all your friends that watch the financial channels are like, yeah, they're finally regulating you now, Bitcoin. They're going to come get you. And I'm like, they still can't. Like, I a novice understanding of this system. Ben, can they
there are.
Like, is it over?
Yeah, there are points of failure. So I was speaking to I won't dox him, but a very prominent, good, productive Bitcoiner working on the development side who's also Russian. And I was discussing in Russia, like, because he's working with the Russians to Russian civilians, because obviously there's certain points of where they can literally just block off parts of the internet in Russia if it's essentially controlled. And then as well as that, they can sniff for, like, there's standard ports which we're using in a lot of our software. But it's that classic, who was the quote that the internet finds a way around censorship or something? It seems it as a bug and finds around censorship. Was it Gilmore, the cypherpunk Gilmore guy? I think it was. There's a great quote about this. But yeah, no, so there are certainly points of failure right now and attacks which can be done, but it just hardens and strengthens our shit. Like, it's anti-fragile. Every time there's a new environment which Bitcoin has to exist in and it gets attacked, then Bitcoin finds a way to work around those attacks. And that's overall a good thing.
It was Gilmore, and it was the net interprets censorship as damage and routes around it. Martin, more on this?
Ben just mentioned the certain ports that the Bitcoin nodes run on, but from what I understood, maybe it changed over the years, but back in the old days, you could just change port 8333 TCP traffic to anything else, and then run over a different port to bypass traffic, or like most of the Umbrel nodes do nowadays, they just route over Tor. And everything is done over Tor. So as long as Tor is operational and not blocked, you can use it from Tor.
Let me list the concerns. Block explorers. Okay, so
and a lot of this stuff is like 1.0 software where they put it out there with the ports and it doesn't change, but they could probably put out a new version where it constantly changes the ports. Like, they don't want to. It's a big pain in the butt, but these small things.
The current issues are They can block block explorers or any of the websites. They can block or detect Bitcoin nodes by monitoring common BTC ports. Yes, you can change ports, but people don't. Ask people to show content on their phones or computers. They can literally just stop you and come into your house and take control of your computer, break into people's houses, and they can isolate the whole internet. So yeah, we got and like in Ukraine.
See, we can fix most of those.
Block explorers.
Exactly.
The Umbrel node, you can install the apps, and one of them is like a block explorer. There's several block explorers, and they run over standard, out of the box, one click install over Tor. So you have your own block explorer. You're not depending on somebody else's block explorer. And because it's a Tor hidden service, it will be extremely hard to block it, provided Tor is not blocked, because in some countries Tor is blocked. So this is the way around it. Yeah, having to look on your phone is an issue, but I remember from the old days, I'm not sure which wallet it was, but it allowed you to have a hidden wallet that didn't show up in the app icons, but you had to dial this number with star and then a sort of like PIN code and then a pound sign on your phone, and then it would pop up the wallet. So there are ways to hide it. If this becomes more common, that they want to crack down, it will also become more common that people will just hide it. Personally, I don't use any third-party services. I run my own node. I use Sparrow to connect to my own node over Tor. I use my own hardware wallets to connect to Sparrow, and I even do my own fee estimates using my own node. So, instead of just using Bitcoin, it will gradually help people to become Bitcoin, and then problem solved.
What about alternate networks like the Blockstream satellite and say mesh network? I wonder how the blocking can happen on a mesh network.
Yeah, I'm not a fanboy of Elon Musk products. Sorry.
Yeah, the Starlink stuff. I did ask about the Tor. I asked.
I was thinking of Blockstream, the satellite.
This Russian Bitcoiner about the Tor thing, and he said that Tor in Russia is partially blocked. Enter and exit nodes are monitored, but he says that Tor with onion links he thinks is pretty safe. So Tor is probably the way to go.
Tor exit nodes you can't really trust them, but if the endpoint is on the Tor network, you never use the Tor exit nodes. So that makes it safe. So if you just use Tor for your Tor links and don't use any exit nodes, then you're pretty safe. Tor has had a bit of a history where many exit nodes were located in Langley, Virginia. Well, I don't know anybody who lives in Langley, Virginia, except the US spy agencies. So they were just running a whole bunch of exit nodes and monitoring traffic on it. Of course, I'd do that, if I got unlimited funding. Yeah, Tor, you should only use Tor to access Tor sites, in my opinion. And then you're okay, you're safe. But don't use it to view anything on the clear web. But this is an interesting topic. I think we should get back to this in a future episode where we, highlight the risks and workarounds for, privacy on using Bitcoin, or basically anti-censorship, and make it bomb-proof.
And using Bitcoin when you haven't got internet or electricity. Like, how do you use Bitcoin? Like, how, like the Ukraine, where vast parts of the Ukraine have been
solve
taken
it. You can actually mine using a pen and pad, can't you?
Yes, there we are. That's the answer.
But, so Andy Meows is asking, do we expect to see Russian hash rate drop off as they try to disconnect from the internet? But I don't see that happening, because as they're being sanctioned more and more, they're not going to want to cut off revenue streams from the rest of the world.
I think they've got other things on their minds. Yeah.
Yeah,
that would be another one of those lean on Bitcoin ideas where you say, hey, Bitcoin, you should block all the Russian blocks, because we're blocking the McDonald's, we're blocking KFC, we're blocking all these other things. So maybe
that doesn't work, because if they found a block, they found a block. It's not running. You can't just block the new block. I mean, this. I don't think this. It's not a bug. It's a feature, I think. Huh?
So you'd have to go around the world, find all these developers, get the developers to put the code you want into the software to block the people.
And then people will ignore that new forked version and will keep using the old version because there is no consensus. And then nothing will change. This is, I think, it's
that's the real hard part there. You have to convince people, you have to have them understand that you would have to force a worldwide minor consensus. Everyone would have to agree, we're going to run the new 0.3 software that has all the spying stuff in it, and we have no choice. And if anyone stayed behind on the 0.2 software without the spying stuff, they would have their own network, their own Bitcoin. And as long as that decision kept happening and they keep getting blocks on the old network, the new network's going to have a hard time replacing it and saying that it is the one. Yeah.
Is it that like what happened with Ethereum at the time when the DAO got hacked? The Dead on Arrival, the Digital Autonomous Organization. It got hacked, and then they forked, and then we had Ethereum Classic and Ethereum. And the old one doesn't die. Okay, the price went down dramatically, but I think with Bitcoin it will be the other way around. People just stay on the old chain, and they will not implement those new surveillance features.
I never was into like the WWF wrestling, but my favorite thing of the split from Ethereum to ETH Classic was that meme with like Vince McMahon, and it's like immutable, and he like falls off his chair, like comparing ETH Classic to Ethereum. It's like probably one of my favorite crypto memes ever.
The instructions for the DAO, do you remember this? So the instructions for the DAO were on the Ethereum website for like a month or two before someone made it. So it's almost like the Ethereum Foundation. They're like, you can make this thing. Here's the instructions to make it. Someone else make it, so we don't take the blame when it all fucks up and breaks. And then inevitably it broke.
It broke.
but we'll still reverse the chain, right? We'll still reverse the chain.
Just roll it back. It's fine. Whatever.
Not so decentralized.
All right, but back to the topic. I do think that it's interesting how people will have to change their habits. Like you're saying, if someone stops you and wants to look at your phone, it's not that difficult to have one of those websites. Like back in the day, you'd push a button and an Excel spreadsheet would come up and it looks like you're doing work. You could have one of those for your phone with a whole like fake world inside and normal emails and all that. And then you go into the Super Monkey Ball app and you enter 35207, boom, it opens up your secret phone. And it sounds like, James Bond spy stuff for that, but it'd be very easy for normal people to start doing that if they have to. and if they're provided easy tools by software developers and other things to get around this. But yeah, I could see people having to have very different habits to continue to use Bitcoin, but Bitcoin continuing. And the other thing to note is that, and we say this all the time, this might be the high point of access to Bitcoin. This is the golden time. You can take your ATM card, maybe even your credit card, your bank account, your existing system, and you can buy and sell Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, et cetera, just from your accounts. It's very possible that they say, oh, well, we're just not going to allow that anymore. And then it goes back to like a black market thing, and you got to meet somebody at a coffee shop, and then they shut down that website because they pretty much already did. But of course, they'll have a P2P matching website with a P2P reputation system, and you'll use that to get your Bitcoin. And if you get your Bitcoin, then you can buy what you actually want. And as long as they're standing in the way of a market that wants to buy something that they want, and you're saying you can't buy it with government cryptocurrency, you can't buy it with dollars or cash if that exists as an option, there's going to be an alternative payment system, and it's going to be Bitcoin. So
yeah, it's also good for, I mean, I want to give props to, there's a lot of Bitcoin exchanges who had a lot of pressure from some of the right-wing types on banning Russian users from using their exchanges. And a lot of them were like, no, because these are predominantly civilians who very possibly very much need access to Bitcoin right now, and we should definitely not be banning it. So a huge props to Coinbase. You know, they didn't bow to public pressure. Kraken as well, they haven't bowed to public pressure. I don't know about the rest of them, but props where props are due. But it's also a good drive for why we need decentralized exchanges as well. So again, it like pours energy into building those services for people so they can circumvent regulation.
It does say that Coinbase has blocked 25,000 Bitcoin wallet addresses linked to Russia.
All right, props not to Coinbase then, but to Kraken.
Yeah, I'd hold back on that one there. But it is interesting to see how the war and et cetera are affecting the Bitcoin.
In fact, I get to, I don't know if this is public or not, but anyway, Kraken, I'm just going to say, Kraken, they've for their Ukraine users who they know are definitely in Ukraine, they've airdropped them like, I think it's like $1,000 worth of Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, it's public. Yeah.
It is public. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's cool, but is it, is it a bit of a publicity thing? Obviously, it's very nice.
I think it's more that they want to try and help.
Cool, but
they want to try and help their customers.
I agree with Dan here. I think many companies are using the whole war as a publicity stunt, and I think that's wrong. It's unethical.
Yeah, it's like the OnlyFans that are saying like 40% off for Ukrainian people. Yeah.
I did speak to one of the Kraken core guys, and he seemed very impassioned. And I don't think it is just for. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Obviously, like with these private companies, you can never trust them, and quite often they do shit which is literally just for press. But I do think that they're making a stance and trying to help in the way in which they can. So
Kraken core. I thought you said crack whore guys, and I was like, that's incorrect. They're adult people on OnlyFans. You can't call them that, Ben.
Crack whores.
Yeah, it's nice to see them doing that, but it's also worth reminding that Kraken still hasn't adopted the Lightning Network. I saw a great post on Twitter this morning where a guy was a developer, and he was like asking Jesse or somebody, was like, which one of these positions do I have to apply for to build the Lightning Network at Kraken? And the results were mixed. People weren't pleased with the Kraken interviewing process and so forth. It didn't seem they were quite serious about Lightning. So, but moving on to the exit question, compete against the Bitcoin predictor ball. Yes, the predictor of predictors, prognosticator of prognosticators, the greatest source of knowledge in all the universe, the Bitcoin predictor ball. Martine Wishmayer, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
I'm just looking at my stats. Let me see. I think we're going sideways. Is that an option I can? Is that
Sideways or push is considered the weakest of all options, almost like not even making a choice. Yes.
No. This is what the market does.
Smith neutrality, perhaps. Yes.
The market
unless you're within, unless you're like you get it to 0.1%. Either way, and that way, that's very ninja. That's a good prediction, right? But if you just go,
I thought for a second that I was going to pull out like a real crystal ball, like a big one, and start.
No, I'm just looking,
or perhaps a competitive 8-ball, and get the answer that way.
Yeah. Oh, look what I have here out of the beard.
I'll say, it's difficult. It depends a bit on the war, I think, at the moment. It's but I do think that people it will take some time, but eventually price will go up. It's difficult. I will trust the 8-ball on this. It's better than any analyst I've seen on the internet so far.
The beard is conflicted. The outlook is cloudy, even through the beard. Dan Eve, higher or lower?
Okay, so I am happy this week because my 2 predictions last week was that there would be Bitcoin would go up, and which I'm not that fussed about that it's gone down slightly, but I also said that there was going to be nuclear war. So because it was reverse psychology with the universe, and I won because there's no nuclear war yet. So I will say that the price will go down next week because then it will go up. So everyone put your longs in.
There it is. Finally, reverse psychology paying off. Ben Ark, higher or lower?
I think higher. But can you enable screen sharing? Because I just want to show what I've been working on today very quickly.
Oh.
How do I do just desktop? Oh yeah, that's that one. Yeah, I'm on the right thing. So I was making an 8-ball extension for Allen Bits, and then I got you to send me all the different options. So what I hope to, and hopefully I'll roll this out in the next week. It'll be so you
no
have
pun intended.
You'll have an Ellen Euro pay, and you'll pay it, and then as the receipt, you'll get a Magic 8-ball thing which says something, just a random Magic 8-ball thing. And I was going to try and use the RNG stuff as well to make it like truly random. But I haven't finished. I wanted to finish it for the show, but I haven't finished it. I've been working on that today, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, higher.
Do you know what you could also do? You could fork that and do a fortune cookie version.
Well, when you go into the extension, you can actually put your own word list in. So I was thinking battleships, because this is something we talked about for ages. Like playing battleships, so you pay an Ellen Euro pay, and then it goes to your opponent, and then you get a random coordinate for your battleships thing or something. But yeah, absolutely, you can change. The point is you can change the things, but it will be a Magic 8-ball and then random.
Oh, nice.
Anyway,
sounds very cool. One of the first programs that I wrote for the TI-82 graphing calculator was a Magic 8-ball program. Mine was pretty normal though. I just had bitmap images for the 8-ball and the other side. And then my friend, who was much smarter and better at programming than I, he went in and made it all like geometric. So it would draw the circle and it would fill in the area and everything. And it saved so much disk space. You guys have no idea. You kids, your infinite programs and so forth. Anyway, here we go. The Magic 8-ball. Will the price be higher this time next week? Shaking it may cause bubbles. Not so good. Outlook not so good. The ball has spoken. It's probably not good for the war either. What are you going to say?
Get a second camera that literally focus. Just buy an entire new camera just so that it focuses on that, like the down.
I agree completely.
Yeah,
it's the most important part of the show.
Outlook
not blank.
Outlook not so good.
Ben is right. It's the people watch this show for investment advice, and the best advice is the.
A lot of people they're like, I stake my whole life on that ball,
and this is investment advice as well. So
how do you think that kid got FTX, the company, all that money? The ball. It's a secret. Moving on to issue 2. Will Biden's executive order on cryptocurrency speed up the spot Bitcoin ETF approval. Yes, it's the story that won't go away. I thought that I'd cut it from today's show, but it's still there. It won't stop. Yes, an ETF is an exchange traded fund where you can invest your stock market money in Bitcoin. If you haven't just lost all your stock market money in the last 2 weeks or so and committed Harry Carey as far as investing goes. So yes, a spot ETF rather than a futures one would be better because you can invest directly in it. And now that there's a Biden crypto order, maybe it's going to come true. Martine Wishmayer, these people, they have their money in their retirement accounts, their pre-tax retirement money. They've been wasting away in Apple and Amazon and Google and other tech stocks. They want to buy that sweet spot Bitcoin ETF. Will this ever happen? Is Bitcoin going to go to $100,000 a coin before these poor retirement people can get that sweet investment?
Well, people expect miracles to happen after an executive order, but it takes years, if not longer, to put this order into actual policy. So for now, nothing will change at the Security and Exchange Commission. It will just be business as usual. They will keep rejecting all these ETF applications, and no, not for the foreseeable future. And in 4 years' time, there will probably be a new president, and it might all be he'll hit the undo button, and we'll be back to square one on that. So no, if you're living off your retirement money, just enjoy life. Don't worry about it too much, and definitely don't hold spending until the ETF is there, because that will probably take years.
Yes, you could have made a lot of money if you cashed out your retirement, took the tax penalty, invested in Bitcoin rather than waiting for this endless ETF. Ben Ark, will we get an ETF? Has the executive order made magic, as Martine said?
It's funny because for years we were like, oh, we get this ETF, it's going boom. And then it just seems like the ETF adoption or ETF implementation is just a slow, boring process. And we sort of ebb towards it. So we have the futures ETF, and eventually we will have the spot ETF. But it won't be really much news, because a lot of these investment funds have got other ways in which they can invest in Bitcoin, either through the futures or by investing in an ETF, which invests in the industry, Bitcoin industry, and that's a way of them having access to Bitcoin. So it wasn't that tsunami of liquidity from traditional markets and retirement funds pouring into Bitcoin. They've had access through some of these other kind of ETF mechanisms. When we do get the spot ETF, would be great, but having some clarity. I mean, I think for business owners, the main thing when it comes to Bitcoin is just clarity on where they stand regulatory wise, and hopefully with this Biden bill, we'll be able to clarify that.
It reminds me of when Litecoin was going to be added to Mt. Gox. They were going to make the new Midas trading engine, and soon Litecoin would be added to Mt. Gox, and there'd be a huge surge. And just like with this, we're like, once we get this ETF, there'll be a huge surge as all the stock market money enters the Bitcoin market. But it's like Lucy with the football. They just keep taking it away. Dan, Eve, should we go ahead and kick the football once more?
Well, I think that because the fact that there was a futures ETF approved, that kind of the hype that would have come with a spot ETF at that time has kind of shifted in that a lot of people would have heard about the futures ETF and thought, actually, why wait for a spot ETF when I can just buy Bitcoin myself? And they probably would have done the research and gone through that way. Obviously, that doesn't still let pensions in and other funds that want to invest directly without going in via futures. But it does kick off the general process of learning about Bitcoin and thinking, right, well, why wait for a spot ETF when I can buy in, or as other people have said, buy in via Bitcoin related stocks. So buy into Coinbase or buy into other Bitcoin infrastructure. Whilst I think it's not going to be for a while, the Bitcoin spot ETF, it's going to happen. It's just a case of when. And The when is like when they decide that the volatility of Bitcoin or the market, well, I say the volatility is always going to be quite volatile, right? Just like just like anything else is pretty volatile, but just it's more around when they decide that when there's less people moaning about the fact that the markets are manipulated and blah blah blah, and it's used for nefarious things like terrorism. When those kind of die down, I think then there's going to be a bit more confidence in approving a spot ETF rather than a futures one.
It's funny to see how it's always an argument for legitimacy. We're always like, if we could just get discussed on CNBC, if we could just get the government to approve a spot ETF. Meanwhile, Bitcoin, the software, Bitcoin, the network, it doesn't care. It just stays out there, still functioning, sending the blocks around, doing the transactions, doesn't care from the beginning. Hasn't really changed significantly, hasn't really cared about all of our activity, whether it be YouTube or Congress or the president or whoever it is. Bitcoin, the software, the network just doesn't care and just keeps doing its thing. So yes, it's funny to see how much things have changed, and yet still not enough for a spot ETF. Moving on to the exit question. As Dan said, it's a question of time. Will there be a Bitcoin spot ETF in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, or never? Martine Wishmayer, give the stock people some hope here.
3 years, but don't wait for it. Just buy some Bitcoin yourself. If that's not possible, then buy into infrastructure stocks like Shitcoin Base or the miners. It will take some time. As I said, this executive order isn't some magically changing thing that changes the market overnight. The Security and Exchange Commission works very slow. They will not change anything in their policies unless the policies are changed, but that will take years. So 3 years is an optimistic bet, but 5 years would be more realistic, I think.
You could even try to set up one of those self-custody Bitcoin wallets. I hear it's like a Swiss bank account in your pocket. And the president said that, the real president. Dan, Eve, what about these Bitcoin ETFs? 1 year, 3 year, 5 years? Never.
I'm with Martin. I think 3 years is kind of sensible because that puts us into kind of the next president territory, and there could be a chance that if Biden, it doesn't happen under Biden, it's going to happen quickly under someone who's like very pro Bitcoin. But when you said about the regulation changing, it's taken a lot of time. It kind of made me think about the rule changes in Bitcoin and the fact that that you can't just make a rule change overnight. It takes time. So regulation is just like a really, really shit version of Bitcoin.
There you go. And that's how people will explain it to themselves in the future. Ben Ark, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, never.
November 15th will happen.
He's got the newspaper holding it up and everything.
Very precise.
Hill Valley.
The Back to the Future newspaper. Have you got the almanac? Have you got the shitcoin almanac?
1.21 gigawatts. What was I thinking?
They'll push
what
it
the
through.
hell is
They'll
a
push it through.
gigawatt?
They'll push it through because the Biden thing. They'll do their research and be like, "Yep, we need a Bitcoin ETF," and they'll just push it through.
I saw a flux capacitor in the background.
It could be. I don't know. I really thought Leo was going to get it. Valkyrie. They were approved for a futures ETF, I think, but not for a spot ETF. I thought that was a really good one. Would have been cool. Moving on. Check out WCN Clips. We've got 91 subscribers. So obviously, if 9 of you subscribe to this YouTube channel, you could put it into the stratosphere at 100. But really, I think what you should be doing is going down here to the YouTube clips and sharing them with your friends. It's like a little shorter version of the show that people could watch. Can Russians use Bitcoin to evade sanctions? Bitcoin donations to the Ukrainian army? The anti-vax trucker movement? Can they cash out their Bitcoin? These topics and more on WCN Clips. You can share them with people. It would be just like the Joe Rogan clips, and you could share them. It would be cool. Moving on to issue 3. Bitcoin ATMs declared illegal in the UK by financial regulator. Yes, government regulators all over the show today. And now in the United Kingdom, where we see a General Bytes ATM in Leeds in the United Kingdom with a closed sign taped to the front of it. The Britain's Financial Conduct Authority said that all Bitcoin ATMs are illegal until they are declared legal again. Let's go to Martine Wishmayer from General Bytes, the ATM pictured in this article, for a little bit more on this exciting new British regulatory environment.
Yeah, it's typical crypto copy paste news in this case. It's not that Bitcoin ATMs are illegal, but it's that none of the machines are registered in the UK as a what is it, MLR, money. The M stands for money, and the rest I don't know. But it's like every other country where you have to register. In the US, that's you have to be a money service or transmitter. In the Netherlands, you need to have or in Europe, everywhere you need to have permission. Basically, you have to explain to the regulator how you are combating fraud, how you will be preventing abuse from criminals on your ATM network. And if you don't do that, then you will not get a license to operate. And in the UK, it has always been free, just do your own business type of environment. But the financial FCA, I think it's the FCA, has been cracking down on this, and it requires people to register. So when you register, you have to explain how are you going to combat smurfing, for example, to money laundering, for example, large amounts. For large amounts, people need to provide an ID, to prevent money laundering. So if you break a large amount into smaller amounts, called smurfing, then you can try to use that to evade the requirement to register. So what happens here is that the companies operating the ATMs either did not file their application, or they didn't provide enough information. I don't know the exact process here, but many waited too long to file their application, and they didn't satisfy questions that every regulator will ask us. How are you going to combat smurfing? Well, for example, you can combat smurfing by setting a maximum limit on the ATM, so you can limit the amount of anonymous transactions, no matter how big or small, on an ATM per day, per week, per month, per hour, any limits. How are you going to identify customers? This is something they do want to know. You can, some regulators are happy with just sending a text message. Even if it's a prepaid phone, they will know that there's only a limited number of prepaid phone numbers a person has. So we don't really care, just use a prepaid phone. In other countries, we see a very, very strict anti-money laundering policy, where they actually require a third party to onboard new customers to an ATM, on an ATM. For this reason, we implemented on FIDO, which is optional. It's a third party service that will validate you as a person. It will validate your identity. It will do that all via a link on your phone. And once you're cleared, you're free to use any of the ATMs. Even the most strict regulators will be okay with that. The reason is a third party doing the verification process. People have to be onboarded via that third party. Many of those neo banks, those app-only banks, use the same on-FIDO system for onboarding their clients. So if it's good for the banks, it must be good for ATM operators too. What I think happened here is that none of the operators that filed for an application even mentioned what they're doing against money laundering. So, and this was a reason for the regulator to say, well, reject it, you're out, do your homework again and get back to us. Some of them just plain out refused and took it to the court, which of course they'll lose, because you're always, if you're fighting the big guy, then it's just a sign of the times. You have to be compliant if you run an ATM network. If you have no people say there's nobody to monitor this, there's no compliance officer in your company, then yeah, you'll have a hard time. So the crypto news outlets, they just copy pasted this, just like they always do, without checking any facts, or even checking the FCA website, which clearly says that. Let me find it here. I found it here. We are concerned that crypto ATMs in the UK will be contacting operators, instructing that the machines have to be shut down or face further action. So they have to shut down. It's like game over, time's up. And they've had over a year or maybe 2 years to apply for this license. So I think it's just a matter of regulator stepping in, and there will be new ATMs, but it's probably going to be another company or the existing companies that just refine their whole AML KYC procedure. And, I know what we are thinking in the Bitcoin group is there should not be any AML KYC checks. But unfortunately, if you're dealing with cash money, even if there is no crypto regulation, there is regulation for handling cash money, so that applies too. So yeah.
And
I don't
this
know.
is definitely one of the places where they can apply regulation. Like we said, this is the end of the network. This is the cash entry point. So they control the cash. They decide how it's used. They're going to regulate this point.
It's not like Binance or another online exchange where you just can move your service to from Hong Kong to some other jurisdiction and then continue business as usual. It's a very visible part of the of the crypto ecosystem. It's very visible. It's this physical machine. So this is something that they will try to regulate. And if you're operator of those ATMs, you can say, well, we're not going to do this, but that's not really an option if you're operating in a jurisdiction where the regulator says you have to register. So every other country in the world, well, as far as I know, most other countries in the world have some form of regulation on the ATMs, either the amount of money that you can use in cash, or limits or requirements on the verification process of the clients. So it doesn't come as a huge surprise that in the UK you have to be registered too. And this is not news or anything. It has been going on for almost 2 years, and it's only now that they're pulling the plugs. And some of the operators, they either have to comply or sell their machines and move on. But it would be nice to see if they do apply for a license. For us, it's important with a manufacturer. As a manufacturer, we changed our AML KYC procedure, wizard, backend, complete overhaul. It took us almost 2 years, but every little part of the whole AML KYC process has been changed, and operators can set their ATM so to any level of compliancy. I mean, even third-party onboarding is possible, and there is no real excuse for the regulator to deny access. It's just that they need to know that you are doing your best, or not your best. You're doing anything possible to prevent abuse of your network. Regulators work in a funny way. They usually don't say you have to do this and you have to do that, and that's what we don't know. That they turn it around. You have to prove to them that you took appropriate measures and steps to prevent abuse of your network, and then they say yes or no. And if they say no, then you have to come back to them and improve on where they have their doubts. But from my experience, any doubts regulators might have can be taken away. And for this reason, we hired 50 people to overhaul the entire backend software. So yeah, you can be compliant. It just takes a little bit of work.
It's also, I'm reminded, there's two kind of main legal philosophies. There's one philosophy where everything is legal until it's illegal. And there's another philosophy where everything is illegal until it's legal. And it seems like the British laws are just kind of shifting from a more open system where you could be compliant and not actually be compliant to now a closed system where you actually have to be compliant. It was also interesting to hear Martine say that about the smurfing problem, and that it's not those little blue monsters with the white hats getting in your machine. Like, my Bitcoin ATM is smurfing broken. That would be a big problem with those smurfs. So it's interesting to see. And remember, of course, the smurfs, Gargamel was trying to capture them, to capture the working people and their labor, to turn them into gold. Interesting left-wing metaphor there. Let's go on to Dan Eve. What about the Bitcoin ATMs? They're all shut down. It's over. It's over.
Well, it's a bit of hyperbole in the headline, isn't it? But you just got to feel the problem is
you have to go now to a special underground Bitcoin ATM club. And the first rule of Bitcoin ATM club is you do not talk about Bitcoin ATM club.
I just feel, the real victims of the ML rules are the banks. There was only last year only $672 million of banking fines to NatWest, poor NatWest, poor Credit Suisse, poor HSBC Holdings, and various others who failed to uphold proper anti-money laundering rules. So it's really good. I think it's really good that they're trying to punish the ATM, Bitcoin ATM holders, because obviously that's where the real money is, not in the existing banking system. That's just joke money, right? That's like internet monopoly money that they have on fake databases and stuff. So they're going after the hard money because it's easier to be mean to smaller things. But no, it is a bit of a kind of a hyperbole headline that they're not like banning them, they're just kind of enforcing them to adhere to certain rules. And the problem is the landscape's not going to be kind of free and libertarian forever. In order to be able to operate, you are going to have to kind of submit to certain rules, unfortunately. And that's what's happening to these small providers, like at least the ATM providers that are certainly, they're not as big as the banks. They have to adhere to these rules in order to operate. And whilst it's crap, unfortunately, like it's what you've got to do to survive as a business. Otherwise, you are going to get shut down. And it's easier to shut down a small business than it is to shut down a bank, because banks are too big to fail. In fact, when banks are so dickish that they completely screw everyone's money and fuck everything and fuck the world economy, you have to actually give them all the taxpayer money to make sure they don't go down, because otherwise there's a problem, you see. So that's what the sad thing is, that they basically run amok in society doing whatever, and they can get away with it. And then the smaller companies, the smaller, more technical companies, they're actually building innovations that are way better than what the banking technology is available. They're the ones that are being penalized. So I think that we should just feel sorry for the banks, the big banks.
It was also sad to read this week about poor little Deutsche Bank. They couldn't stop operations in Russia because that would have affected their bottom line. Protecting humanitarian crises versus, making money. Deutsche Bank had to side on the making money side. Ben Ark, your thoughts on the Bitcoin ATM crisis in the UK, an absolute 100% stoppage of all Bitcoin ATMs, forced underground into seedy fighting clubs?
It's interesting talking about the banks. I mean, so too big to fail. I mean, Lehman Brothers, the reason we had the 2008 crisis was Lehman Brothers was allowed to fail. And then very quickly, the market got scared. And then all the other banks started failing, and then they had to be bailed out. So yeah, they are literally too big to fail. I think in the UK, we've had very fuzzy regulation when it came to like Bitcoin ATMs. And now it seems that maybe we've kind of gone overkill. It was interesting that in the article, I think they said there was 81 Bitcoin ATMs in the UK, which to me sounds quite low. I imagine there is probably more of these murky ATM Fight Club Bitcoin ATMs out there. So they'll probably continue to exist. But it also in the article it said about how they were targeting.
I can see Ben already. He's working on a sweets machine that would secretly be an ATM, and if you turn the candy wheels just right, like you get a QR code?
Well, that's a very good question, Thomas, because I do have the I mean, it's in pieces now because it got smashed about when I took it to some conferences. But I have got this little ATM right here, and like this is the idea of the FOSSA, the free and open source ATM, which I was making, was that it'd be so cheap that if someone came and stole it, if someone came to your bar and said, "Oh my God, there's a Bitcoin ATM, and we're going to take it and confiscate it," then you could just say, I don't know whose that is.
But Ben, you can use a can opener to open the.
You can use a can opener sort of thing. Yes, you have to keep an eye on it. But yeah, no. So it's not a solution. Clearly, like these ATMs are actual ATMs, like general bytes are useful ATMs. But they were targeting particularly. Is smurfing? Is that mules? So getting people to go to different ATMs and taking small amounts out.
The smurfing is it's not just with Bitcoin ATMs. It's in the financial world means breaking up a larger amount into smaller amounts to evade limits, detection, and usually there is either one or multiple people doing it. So in that case, those people would be mules. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, because they said they were actively sort of targeting, or they're aware of the mules who are getting under 250
it's a bit of nonsense because you can set, the ATMs can be set so that there is a limit on the amount of anonymous transactions per day, per week, per month. So nice. if you break up the large amount into hundreds of smaller amounts, and then eventually the machine will be able to say, no, sorry.
There was that great Reddit post, and it was like 2017, and then someone came into Reddit and they were like, "Oh, this Bitcoin stuff is amazing! Like, I was unemployed and now I'm earning really good money, and I'm just driving around San Francisco. I'm basically just going to all these ATMs and I'm putting in some cash and I'm getting out some Bitcoin." And then in Reddit, all the comments were like, "Yeah, you're a fucking mule. You're a drug mule." And then they were like, "Oh shit, really?" It's amazing. Yeah.
A tax liable drug mule. Yes, it's the worst kind. Moving on to the exit question. Will the UK Bitcoin ATM market return? Is this a temporary ban, or is this the end and they all go underground like Fight Club and you got to turn the wheels on the sweep machine like a safe combination? Martine Wishmayer, is this the end for the UK?
No, I think either we'll see some of the operators apply for a license and then become compliant, and they'll convince the regulator that they do have their measures in place to prevent abuse of the networks, or we'll see a new ATM operator stand up and buy all the equipment from the old ones and then run an entirely different kind of business. So in a way, it's probably going to be a professionalization of the market where we see the smaller companies either dissolved or grow up to be a more professional company. Like, for example, the regulators will probably require that you have somebody on board that is a compliancy officer. I mean, he just drinks coffee all day and just looks at his email, doesn't do anything else. But yes, he is the compliancy officer. So for compliancy related issues, you have to contact the compliancy officer and stuff like that. If you don't think about that, they're probably not going to give you a license. So it's yeah, they'll definitely return. I'm 100% sure about that.
I think professionalization is the correct term, and it's something that we kind of need. Even in the recent Ukraine crisis, there were governments that had emailed wallet companies, and the wallet companies were in the right. They really don't have access to the wallets, but they need to explain that in a technological way, in a normal way, and without the snarky sarcasm. It's fun to be snarky and sarcastic to the government when they're asking you a question, but it's a horrible idea long term. Anyone that's a professional knows you're going to have to deal with them down the line, and they're going to remember the snarky comments. So yes, it's a sad thing. Like we're saying that a bar will be raised, and if you're not willing to KYC your customers to prevent money laundering, etc., whatever the state wants, if you're not willing to follow the rules, you don't get to keep being an operator, despite your earliness to the market and your libertarian beliefs and so forth. So Yes, Martin's calling it professionalization. I think they'd call it other things and they'd be upset about it. But it just seems like a natural thing that's going to happen to these markets where some professional group will come in and they'll do all the regulations and they'll have all the legal stuff. And pretty soon they'll be operating in all the places where your fly by night ATMs used to operate in. And it's just how it happens. All these markets go through this change. Dan Eve, is it the end of the UK Bitcoin ATM markets? Sell your house, sell your home, hide your kids, hide your wife.
No, I think there's going to be like a transition. There'll be, as Martin says, that there'll be some that like sell out to the bigger companies. There could be this could enforce a bigger transition, like of existing ATM infrastructure to suddenly start supporting Bitcoin. And at least from a selling buying Bitcoin, selling Bitcoin perspective, or vice versa. So you'll see existing infrastructure being suddenly equipped with being able to use Bitcoin, and then there'll be ones that just go out like guns are toting. They'll wait until the final ATM is like forcibly removed from a corner shop or a pub or whatever, with no KYC, and it'll have queues around it, and yeah, it'll be a nice little event as the government comes and like pries it from the hands of the users.
And the argument for that will be, but we've had it so long. We've had it so long. It's a part of our community. It's a country we used to own. We've had it so long. You can't take it away from us. Ben Ark, is this the end of the UK Bitcoin ATMs?
Yeah. Post Brexit, where the self-deprecating, bureaucratic, sadomasochistic country, which is probably the worst place to set up any sort of Bitcoin business. We're just going to create paperwork and rules and regulation, and our entire economy is screwed.
And a 137-page manual on how to grow pickles.
We have the largest tax legislation in the world. We're just going to regulate everything out of existence, completely destroy all industry. So yes, it's the end of the Bitcoin ATM scene in UK. But yeah.
But tons of jobs for regulators. It's a whole Brazil, Terry Gilliam type economy that needs to be built up. Of this is my receipt and this is your. That's
true. It's a bit like modern monetary theory. That everyone will be employed as bureaucrats and regulators, and then we'll all have money, and then we can all pay for services, pay for more bureaucracy and regulation. So yeah,
bureaucracy and regulation is a hot new job in the UK. You can always be a banker. I saw some bankers in the city of London. Oh man, they were not like normal people. They had the full suit, they had like the umbrella, and they were like marching through the streets. It was straight up like you were a peasant, they were a banker, and it was.
Well, they're the gentlemen managing all that Russian oligarch money, but now that's gone. So
yeah, I think the whole marching thing was probably because of the Colombian marching powder they had up their nose before they went to work. No,
I just saw that in the Tower Records documentary. They said it was hand truck fuel. And it was a line item in their expenses each month. We have to have a certain amount of hand truck.
Literally
fuel.
A line item.
Yeah, just like the Wolf of Wall Street. What's that? Wolf of Wall Street? Did you see it?
Very
Same
much.
Thing.
Same things. Very popular. Popular in the 80s. Moving on to issue 4, Fool's Gold or Safe Haven. War puts Bitcoin to the test. Everyone calls Bitcoin a digital gold. But they just had a war, and the price of it went down, like the price of the stock market went down. Therefore, Bitcoin's not a digital gold, and you've all lied to me, says the mainstream media, suddenly afraid that nothing matters during war, not even computer games and video games and other things. Ben Ark, what about the war? How's it affecting Bitcoin? Is it still a safe haven?
I think we mentioned this before, like in other economic like with the pandemic, when the pandemic stuff kicked off, and then you had like a market downturn, and then Bitcoin correlated with the market, and then it decoupled. So I think what happens is people, they go to try and test the safe havens such as Bitcoin, such as gold, and then that thin layer of traders is evaporated out, and then you end up with the actual Bitcoiners who are putting their wealth in Bitcoin because they understand it as a good store of value. So I think we're still at that point now. Like we've hiccuped up from the Biden news, and we've sort of decoupled a little bit from the market. But I do think we're at that point now where we're going to decouple, and people are going to be like, okay, yeah, Bitcoin, safe haven. But the real question is, how do we use Bitcoin in a war scenario? And I think a lot of us in Europe, for example, Ukraine's a very progressed country, and it looks like our countries and then we see it, at war and build these buildings being destroyed, and then we think, well, how does Bitcoin work in that kind of scenario where there's no electricity, no internet access, all those sorts of things? And these are all problems which a lot of great Bitcoiners are all working on, and again, which we mentioned in an earlier topic. So yeah, the price currently is still teetering, coupled with market prices, but it will did it as just as it did with the pandemic and other economic hiccups we've had. It will then you'll see that safe haven price rise, which you would imagine in a scenario where I think the real news is, I mean, like on both sides of the war, people are finding use for Bitcoin. The Ukrainians for accepting donations, which can't be confiscated, and then the oligarchs for trying to avoid sanctions as well. So it's this crazy new technology which everyone can use and benefit from. So I think, yeah, the price is going to go up, but for now, it's still we're only 2 weeks into this conflict. Quite amazingly, 3 weeks ago, I was playing. I don't know if anyone plays it, Population One on the Oculus Quest. I was playing it with my friend, and I was excusing staying up till 1 a.m. playing with my goofy mate from back home, because we need to prepare for the war. And it's like, yeah, there'll never be another war, will there? And then a week later, all the Ukraine stuff kicks off. And like now we're 2 weeks into the Ukrainian crisis. And now a statement like that is like, yeah, we do actually need to prepare for the war. So yeah, Europe's a tinderbox. We could all go to shit, but hopefully it won't. And yeah, the Bitcoin price will go up because people realize that it is a safe haven and not correlated markets.
I thought of a great meme while you're talking there. They could have a broken down, bombed out bank building and then have a little girl in front. She's kind of crying and pointing at the building. And then the caption, it reads, "Don't worry, they don't store your Bitcoin in there."
That's ruthless.
And also, I think at this time, when the price goes down and we separate and everyone loses faith and all that, it comes back to the idea as Bitcoin as a collectible. There's only 21 million units. It's locked. So if you can get your hand on even one of those 21 million units from a collectible standpoint, it's just too few units, so many people in the world. I think it's going to go up. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Bitcoin and the war and my amazing new meme?
I think the meme is incredible. I like it. You need to make it though, right? You need to make it and then probably NFT it, right? Just to be with the current times. But in terms of inflation, so inflation is in the US, it's the highest it's been for a long while. Russia and China has been going on the gold hoarding for a while now. They've been trying to kind of wean themselves off the dollar. So in terms of Bitcoin decoupling itself, I think it's moving towards that way, especially now that the dollar is losing its kind of hold on the rest of the world, because other big economies are moving towards back into the gold standard. I think that there's an opportunity now for Bitcoin to actually surpass the gold as a means of long-term store of value. But it does require that there's no kind of nuclear war, because as we've kind of discussed, it relies on like the existing infrastructure, right? Bitcoin is an internet money, and if internet has been cut off in huge ways, like via nuclear war, you can't if all the power goes down, right, people are going to resort to gold. They're going to resort to physical things. If you're in an area where there's massive, huge area of the country where the internet goes down, you're going to resort to physical things to transfer. So as long as that doesn't happen and we remain a kind of nice, technologically savvy world, or technologically able world with internet and all the graces of modern life, then Bitcoin will continue to decouple. But maybe that's why Bitcoin at the moment has kind of taken a downturn, because the war in Ukraine isn't over, and therefore people are kind of thinking, oh shit, Bitcoin was a good buy, because these fiat currencies are completely poo and inflation's through the roof in certain ones. But at the same time, if nuclear war goes off, how easy is it going to be for me to send a Bitcoin transaction as opposed to having a little bit of gold?
To be fair, very few currencies work during a nuclear war. It is a pretty tough time for currencies, and sometimes like a sword or a knife that could work just as well as currency in a bad situation. So we don't want to have that. Martine Wishmayer, your thoughts about Bitcoin and the war? I agree with what Ben said earlier about this idea that it was used by both the Ukrainians to accept donations and it was used by the Russians to evade sanctions. The more and more people get used to this invention of lying type Bitcoin as God idea that, God helped your friend. God also hurt your friend. Bitcoin's your friend. He's also your enemy. You just have to get used to it. It's like the tides or the waves. It just keeps coming. What do you think, Martine?
A friend of mine who organized the Dutch Bitcoin meetups, his wife is from the Ukraine, and he uses Bitcoin to send back to the Ukraine, and then cash it out locally. And at first you could do that via an ATM, but none of those are really working anymore. So now there's one exchange called Kuna.io. And you can send Bitcoin there, and then you can cash it out to a local MasterCard, and then you can use it wherever cards are still accepted. So it gives you some spending money, but instead of keeping all the money in a bank, you basically keep it in Bitcoin until you need to spend some, and then you transfer it to your card, or you pay with Bitcoin, whatever is most convenient. But I think therefore, like it's not really like a hedge against inflation. It's more to pay for stuff. Even during a war, you still have to pay for stuff. It doesn't all of a sudden become free. So Bitcoin has proven itself there. How it will work in a nuclear war, I don't know. I think if there would be a nuclear war, we have totally different things to worry about.
I do think that's also a good example of the different service levels of Bitcoin. Right now, you can use Coinbase. You can buy it with your credit cards real easy. They shut all that down. You could use some kind of a MasterCard system, some kind of you buy this and you buy credits, you trade the credits for this. They shut that down. You could use the find the guy on the street corner system, a certain cafe that people hang out and they trade Bitcoin. They shut that down. Like people start wearing red pocket squares on the street. If you find a red pocket square guy, you can get Bitcoin. All these different things are just different layers where at one point it's very easy to buy Bitcoin with your bank account. This is a golden and amazing time. At another point, it might be very difficult. So we just have to keep an eye on that. Let's move on to predictions. Are you ready, Dan Eve, with a prediction about the future?
I predict that, and I'm already worried now because I tested the universe and said that I predicted nuclear war last year. I called its bluff last week. So I'm going to say purely on the reverse psychology thing, because the universe obviously has a mind. It doesn't. It's I do, and mine's crazy. So I'm going to say that I predict nuclear warfare this week.
Martine Wishmayer, hopefully a less apocalyptic prediction.
I predict that this time next month, we'll all be in Miami enjoying the music festival at Bitcoin 2022.
There we go. The optimistic prediction, a calendar-based prediction. Ben Ark, a prediction about the future.
I predict that there will not be a nuclear war next week, Dan, because you were right on the last two predictions, so I'm scared now. But yeah, there won't be a war in the next nuclear war next week. That's my prediction.
Hopefully not. Although if you want to learn more about the fun and exciting situation we're in, you could always check out the new movie, The King's Man. It will tell you all about World War I and how it was a battle between three cousins who also happened to be a king, a kaiser, and a czar. So fun to learn about how accidents and idiots can cause massive wars. Now, Dan Eve, a story of the week. What's been going on this week?
No, I don't have one of those. I'm sorry.
Oh, nothing this week. Martine Wishmayer, what's been going on this week? A
Zero.
story of the week.
We've been extremely busy preparing for the Bitcoin 2022. I will be there with like 2 stands, one for every trade IO, one for general bytes. We released a new feature, and we will release a new ATM model on the show. So it's going to be like lots of news, but if I tell you, I'd have to kill you. So therefore, I'll keep it quiet for another few weeks. But yeah, lots of stuff going to happen very soon.
Very exciting stuff, except for the part where you kill us. Ben Ark, a story of the week. What's been going on over there in LN Bits?
Yeah, I want to reiterate what Martin said about Bitcoin 2022. So trying to work on stuff for that. I haven't actually built the thing which I'm going to be doing my talk on, so I need to kind of get on that next week. What's happening this week? Oh, we've been trying to set up Allen Bits like a ClearNet thing, so you can have using Kubernetes, so you could like put in a subdomain. So you could just go to allenbits.com and you can put in like a subdomain and then pay some sats and then just spin up an Allen Bits and then connect it to your funding source like your LNT export or your OpenNode or your C Lightning, whatever. We've been trying to figure out how to kind of get our heads around that, and then we got some guy working on Kubernetes. So props to him for working on that. But that'd be great because a lot of people, that seems to be in demand. Like people want to be able to spin up like a ClearNet Allen Bits, and they don't have to like do the VPS and the SSL and the domain name stuff themselves. They just want like they'll be happy with the subdomain on allenbits.com. So we've been working on that. And then for anyone who is going to Bitcoin 22, this year we've got an open source stage. So in 2019, I put 2 tables together and I made a little Hackspace open source area because it didn't exist. There was all the stalls for all the businesses, but there was an open source area. And then it was me and Step and Snygref. Then we sat there and we did tutorials with people. It was really nice. And then last year we had a tent. And then this year we've got a full conference stage. So a large portion of Bitcoin 22, props to the Bitcoin 22 dudes, is going to be a big open source conference hall, which is filled with open source projects. A bunch of open source projects have had free tickets off the back of it, which is great. There'll be talks, there'll be demos, there'll be workshops. I'll be doing the Lightning point of sale workshop. I've got like a gazillion of them over here. I don't know if you can see, where are they? There they are, kind of on that shelf there. My little brain can't do this. Okay, on that little shelf there, there's about 70 or something point of sales, which I'll be taking with me to Miami. So hopefully I won't get stopped and get them taken off me at the airport. But yeah, I'll be doing workshops on that too. So yeah, Bitcoin 22 is going to be amazing, and I can't wait to hang out with Martin in the meat space on a beach, smoking
With
cigars
beers.
in Tony Montana.
I stopped smoking, but I still drink beer.
All right, drinking beer and whatever else. But
All right, Dan, Eve, one more chance. Do you have a story of the week? Anything going on this week, Dan?
No, dead. Life is dead.
you're gonna predict a nuclear war, and then this is just gonna be perfect. The prediction.
Yeah, obviously,
because there is no
nuclear war. It's hard to have any other plans. It's hard to be really like. I'm not very excited this week, except for the whole nuclear war prediction. I got that going, but so yeah, my story of the week. I don't know. I checked out the Pam and Tommy TV show on Hulu. I think it's really good. It's interesting from both sides. From the guy who was a carpenter who stole the sex tape from their house, to Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee, who suffered from having the sex tape published. And it was also really an interesting movie because of the internet tie-ins. At first, they got the idea they could sell the tape on a website. They could deliver you the tape through the real world with the post office and so forth. Then eventually they got the idea they could stream the tape. And it also brought up a lot of interesting kind of legal rules on who owned the tape and if physically possessing it was enough to own it and things like that, or possessing a copy of it, so on and so forth. So it's a surprisingly fascinating movie, very pop culture. It's presented in episodes, but it's clearly a movie. I also enjoyed the Tower Records documentary, All Things Must Pass, about a great record store that started out in Sacramento and became worldwide and still has locations in Japan. So I wouldn't mind visiting a Tower Records in Japan. I tell you that from watching the film. And we're celebrating the return of Major League Baseball. Obviously, everything is fine in the world now. There's not any kind of war going on because the owners and the players have come together, and they're going to play a full 162 game baseball season, which will eliminate all of the other problems in the world. But it is nice to have another sport to distract you from all those problems, as it may or may not work, because it's hard to be distracted when you're getting bombed. But it's also hard to use currency during nuclear war. You can learn a lot from today's episode. So thanks to everybody for watching it. You can give us a thumbs up down below. You can subscribe if it's your first time here. We're still trying to get that subscription thing going. Check out WCN Clips on YouTube. Just Google WCN Clips and share them with your friends. And I think that's about it. Anything else going on? All right. So until next time, bye.
Bye.
Bye.